The hammer came down on my painting at 9:17 p.m. The sound of canvas tearing was strangely soft. A white blade split the center of Wintertide, the painting I had spent 11 months creating. The room fell silent as the crimson paint I had deliberately layered beneath the final coat began to bleed through the wound. "Stop!" I shoved through the crowd, but the security guard caught my shoulder. "Mr. Shun, stay back. That's my painting." My voice sounded unfamiliar even to me. Across the exhibition hall, my rival, Lu Yin, stood beside the ruined canvas with a broken metal display rod still in her hand. Her face was pale, not shocked, not frightened, almost relieved. Then she looked directly at me. For one brief second, the trembling disappeared from her eyes. She smiled. I had seen that smile before, just before I died. "Shunrei," she whispered, loud enough for the cameras around us to catch it. "You should have known this would happen." My heart stopped. Because in my previous life, those had been her exact words. I died 3 years ago with that sentence still echoing in my ears. And now, I was standing in the same exhibition hall again, 3 years before my death. The clock on the wall read 9:17 p.m. Exactly as I remembered. My fingers slowly curled. I had been reborn. And this time, when Lu Yin destroyed my masterpiece, I didn't rush forward to save it. I simply stared at her, because I knew something she didn't. She had just made the same mistake that killed me once before. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Lu Yin asked. Her voice was soft, almost mocking. Around us, the invited collectors whispered among themselves. "She looks like she didn't mean to do it. Maybe Shinrue attacked her first. Wasn't there some dispute between them?" Someone lifted a phone. Someone else began recording. The exhibition director, Professor Chiao, hurried toward us. "Everyone, please calm down. We can investigate the matter privately." I looked at the torn canvas, then at Lu Yin, then at the security camera above the eastern entrance. A small red light blinked. Recording, exactly as it had in my previous life. I almost laughed. In my first life, I had panicked. I had screamed. I had grabbed Lu Yin by the wrist and demanded an explanation. She had cried. She had told everyone that I had become unstable because my painting had been rejected from an international competition. The witnesses had believed her. The recording had later disappeared. And 3 days after the exhibition, my studio had burned down. The police had found traces of a flammable solvent inside. My insurance company had refused payment because the solvent had been registered under my studio account. My career had collapsed. My reputation had followed. And 6 months later, when I finally discovered that Lu Yin had copied my painting techniques and sold several works under another name, I confronted her. That night, I was found dead at the bottom of a parking garage stairwell. The official report called it an accident. I knew better, but I had died before I could prove it. Now I had another life, and I had no intention of making the same mistakes. Professor Chiao touched my arm. "Shinrue, say something." I looked at him. In my previous life, Professor Chiao had been one of the few people who defended me. He had also been the first person Lu Yin manipulated. I could still remember him standing at my funeral, his shoulders bent with guilt. This time, I gave him a calm answer. "I have nothing to say yet." His brows tightened. "Nothing. I want to see the footage first." Lu Yin's expression changed. Only slightly. But I noticed. She stepped forward. "The footage won't change anything." I accidentally lost my balance. "Is that so?" I looked at her hand. There was a thin streak of dark red paint across her palm, the same shade as the underpainting. She had touched the damaged section. She had expected me to accuse her. She had expected anger. Instead, I said, "Then let the cameras speak." The room became quieter. Lu Yin swallowed. "You don't trust me?" I smiled faintly. "I trusted you once." Her eyes flickered. That was enough. I turned away. Behind me, I heard her breathing become uneven. Good. She remembered the old Shun Rue, the man who would fight for every inch of his dignity, the man who couldn't tolerate anyone touching his work, the man who would destroy himself trying to prove he had been wronged. She didn't know that man had already died. I walked toward the ruined painting. The tear ran directly across the face of the woman in the composition. My masterpiece was destroyed, but not completely. I crouched down and studied the exposed layers. A tiny smile appeared at the corner of my mouth. There it was, the crimson pigment beneath the final coat. I had created that layer myself. Only 3 people knew it existed. Me, my former assistant, and Lu Yen. In my previous life, I had thought the hidden layer had been an artistic experiment. Now I understood why she had destroyed the painting exactly here. She wasn't trying to ruin it. She was trying to reveal it. She wanted the critics to see the unusual pigment and accuse me of stealing an old restoration technique from a deceased master. The accusation would become the scandal that destroyed my career. I looked at the broken canvas. Then I stood. Professor Chiao. Yes. Don't repair this tonight. He stared at me. Why? Because the person who damaged it expects me to repair it immediately. Lu Yan's face went white. I continued quietly. I think we should let everyone see what happens when a damaged painting is left exactly as it is. For the first time that evening, Lu Yan looked afraid. Not because I had accused her. Because I hadn't. I had simply refused to play the role she remembered. And somewhere inside my chest, the cold fear that had followed me from my previous death finally disappeared. I had been given another life. I would not waste it proving I deserved one. The exhibition ended under a cloud of whispers. By midnight, photographs of the damaged painting were already circulating online. I sat alone in my studio apartment, staring at the rain sliding down the window. My phone vibrated. A message from Lu Yan. We need to talk. Alone. I deleted it. Another arrived. I didn't mean to destroy it. Deleted. Then a third. If you tell people what you think you saw, neither of us will have a future. I stopped. That sentence hadn't existed in my first life. I stared at it for several seconds. Then I saved a screenshot. The first crack in her plan. I opened an old notebook from the bottom drawer. 3 years ago, I had written every name connected to my downfall. Lu Yan, my former assistant, Wei Cheng, gallery owner Han Mo, the restoration company that handled my work, and one name I had never understood, Director Lin. In my previous life, Lin had appeared only after my studio burned down. He had offered to buy my remaining works for almost nothing. I had refused. 2 weeks later, my final major exhibition was canceled. I had thought it was coincidence. Now I knew better. I opened my laptop and searched through archive files. My hands froze. There was an old photograph, taken 3 years earlier. Lu Yan stood beside Director Lin at a private dinner. Between them was a folder bearing the logo of an international art foundation. I enlarged the image. At the bottom of the folder was a date. The same date as my future exhibition. My breathing slowed. This wasn't only about one ruined painting. Someone had been preparing for my downfall long before I knew I was in danger. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. For a moment, I remembered the stairwell, the concrete floor, the smell of rain. Lu Yan's voice. You should have known this would happen. My eyes closed. Then I opened them again. No, I whispered. This time, you should have known. My phone rang. It was Professor Chiao. Shinrei, he said, his voice tense. The gallery just called me. What happened? They want the painting removed from the exhibition. I smiled. Let them. There was silence. Are you sure? Yes. Your reputation. My reputation isn't in that canvas. I looked at the ruined masterpiece. It belongs to what happens next. Professor Chiao breathed out slowly. You've changed. I didn't answer. Because he was right. The old Shinrui had spent his life trying to control how people saw him. The new one had learned something much more valuable. People revealed themselves when they believed they had already won. And Lu Yan believed she had won. That was exactly why I intended to let her keep believing it. The next morning, the headline appeared before I had finished breakfast. Rising artist Shun Rui's masterpiece destroyed after alleged dispute with rival Lu Yan. Below was a photograph of me standing beside the torn canvas. My expression looked cold. Lu Yan's photograph showed her crying. The comments were predictable. He looks arrogant. Maybe the rival snapped after being bullied. Artists are unstable. I put my phone down. In my previous life, I had spent 3 days responding to every accusation. This time, I did nothing. At 10, the gallery director called. At 11, a journalist waited outside my building. At noon, 3 collectors cancel meetings. At 1, my former assistant, Wei Chung, sent me a message. Brother Rue, don't panic. I'll help you explain everything. I stared at the screen. Wei Chung had betrayed me in my previous life. He had copied my studio files and given them to Lu Yin, but he hadn't done it willingly. I remembered his funeral. I remembered his mother's face. I remembered how, before his death, he had sent me one final email. I'm sorry. They threatened my sister. Then the email had disappeared from my account. I had never understood who they were. Now I did. Someone had been controlling everyone around me. I replied, come to the studio tonight. Don't tell anyone. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Okay. I spent the afternoon doing something that made no sense to everyone watching. I opened a new bank account, transferred my savings, changed the password to my studio archive, moved my unfinished works to a private storage facility. Then I called an old friend. Feng Mei. There was a pause. Shun Rue? Yes. I thought you didn't want to speak to me anymore. I did. Her laugh was bitter. That sounds like you. I was wrong. Silence. I looked at the rain beginning outside. I need a lawyer who understands intellectual property theft. Another pause. Why? Because someone is going to try to steal my work. Her voice changed immediately. Do you know who? Yes. Then why aren't you doing anything? I smiled. Because they're going to do it themselves. That evening, Wei Chung arrived at my studio looking exhausted. He closed the door behind him. Brother Rue. I poured him tea. He didn't touch it. You shouldn't have called me. Why? Because they're watching. I looked at him quietly. His fingers trembled. Ooh. He shook his head. I can't say. You can. No. Then tell me this. I pushed my phone across the table. On the screen was a photograph of Lu Yin and Director Lin. Wei Cheng's face changed instantly. He looked away. That was enough. You knew. I didn't know everything. But you knew something. His eyes reddened. They came to me 6 months ago. Ooh. Director Lin. Lu Yin. What do they want? He swallowed. Your original files. The room went silent. What did you give them? Nothing. I watched him carefully. He clenched his fists. They threatened my sister. I know. His head snapped up. You know, I remember more than you think. He stared at me. Then his shoulders dropped. They told me your painting had to fail. Why? I don't know. You're lying. His eyes filled with tears. I swear I don't know. I leaned back. In my previous life, this was where I would have shouted. This time I simply waited. Eventually, Wei Chung whispered, there was another painting. My heart tightened. What painting? A painting you made when you were 20. I frowned. I destroyed it. No. Wei Chung shook his head. They have it. I stood. Where? He looked toward the door. Director Lin's private collection. The realization hit me like ice water. The painting was called Silent Spring. I had created it before I became known. A strange, experimental piece that I considered unfinished. In my previous life, I had forgotten about it. But Lu Yin had always been fascinated by that painting. She once asked me why I never exhibited it. I had told her it wasn't good enough. Now I understood. It contained the technique she had been copying. The pigment combination, the layering, the signature beneath the surface. If someone possessed the original, they could claim my later works were imitations. Wei Chung whispered, they want to prove you stole your own style. I laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. They planned this carefully. Yes. And the painting tonight? He nodded. They wanted the exposed pigment to become the first piece of evidence. I walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain. Everything suddenly connected. The ruined masterpiece. The missing files. The old painting. Director Lin. Lu Yin. My death. It wasn't an accident. My entire collapse had been constructed one step at a time. Behind me, Wei Chung spoke softly. Brother Rue, what are you going to do? I looked at my reflection in the glass. A man stood there whom I barely recognized. Calm. Tired. Alive. Nothing. Wei Chung stared. Nothing. Not yet. But they'll destroy you. No. I turned around. They already tried. I walked to my desk and opened a new folder. Inside, I created one document. The title was simple. Evidence. Then I began typing. Every date I remembered. Every person involved. Every conversation. Every suspicious transaction, every detail from my previous life that had once seemed meaningless. I wasn't going to hunt Lu Yin. I wasn't going to ruin her. I wasn't even going to expose her today. I was going to let her continue, because she had already made one fatal mistake. She believed that destroying my masterpiece had put me on the defensive. She didn't understand that I had already seen the ending. And for the first time since my rebirth, I felt something close to peace. The game had started, but this time, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was simply waiting for them to reveal themselves. At 8 the next morning, the gallery sent me a formal notice. My exhibition was being suspended pending an investigation into possible professional misconduct. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it beside my coffee. No anger, no surprise, only a quiet certainty. The second move had arrived earlier than I remembered. In my previous life, I had fought the suspension immediately. I had called collectors, demanded statements, confronted the gallery board, and spent every waking hour trying to prove that I had been framed. That desperation had made me look guilty. This time, I signed the acknowledgement and sent it back. Understood. I will cooperate fully. Nothing else. At 9:30, my lawyer called. You're not going to challenge the suspension? Not yet. Shunrue, they're implying you fabricated your artistic credentials. I know. And you're just going to sit there? I'll be working. There was a pause. You're strangely calm. I've already learned what happens when I panic. The lawyer didn't ask what I meant. That was one reason I had chosen him. He understood when silence was more useful than questions. I hung up and opened the folder on my computer. The photograph of Lu Yin and director Lin remained on my screen. I zoomed in. There was something behind them. A glass display case. Inside it stood an old painting. The photograph was blurry, but the frame was unmistakable. Black wood, thin silver line along the inner edge. A small crack in the lower left corner. Silent spring. I leaned toward the screen. My pulse quickened. I had seen that frame once before. At Director Lin's house. 3 years ago. The night before my studio burned. In my previous life, I had gone there because Lin claimed he wanted to negotiate the purchase of my collection. He had offered me an insulting price. I had refused. When I left, I noticed a painting in the hallway. I had asked about it. He had laughed and said it was an old piece from an unknown artist. I hadn't looked closely. I hadn't understood. Now I did. He had been showing me my own painting, and I had walked past it. My phone vibrated. A message from Lu Yin. Can we meet? I stared at it, then typed. Where? Her reply came immediately. The cafe near the river. 4 o'clock. I smiled. In my previous life, she had asked to meet me there too. She had cried, apologized, claimed the destruction of my painting had been an accident. Then she had offered to help me recover my reputation. 2 weeks later, she released a statement claiming I had threatened her. That statement had destroyed whatever credibility I had left. I checked the time. 4 o'clock. Same place. Different man. The cafe was almost empty when I arrived. Lu Yin was already waiting. She wore a cream-colored coat and had tied her hair loosely behind her neck. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago. That was the strange cruelty of rebirth. The world remembered nothing. Only I carried the ghosts. She stood when she saw me. You came. You asked. Her fingers tightened around her cup. I didn't destroy your painting intentionally. I know. She blinked. You do. I know you didn't destroy it because you hated it. Her expression softened. That means you destroyed it because you wanted something underneath it. The softness vanished. She stared at me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped against the window. Finally, she whispered, You don't understand. Understand more than you think. You're making a mistake. No. I lifted my coffee. You're making one. Her eyes hardened. You think you're smarter than everyone now. No. I looked at her. I simply stopped assuming everyone was honest. She leaned forward. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Then why aren't you fighting? Because you haven't finished. Her face went pale. What? You have another move. She looked away. That was answer enough. I stood. Enjoy your coffee. Shun Rue. I stopped. Her voice trembled. Are you going to destroy me? I looked back at her. No. She seemed confused. Then what do you want? The truth. And if the truth destroys me, that will be your responsibility. I left before she could answer. Outside, the rain had stopped. My phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. I stopped walking. Then another arrived. Your brother couldn't stay quiet either. My fingers went cold. I had no brother. Not anymore. My younger brother, Shun Hao, had died when we were children. In my previous life, I had never told anyone how much I still blamed myself. But nobody involved in the art world should have known that. I called the number. It was disconnected. I stood beneath the gray sky, staring at the screen. The message wasn't meant to frighten me. It was meant to remind me that someone knew things about my life that they shouldn't know. Someone had access to old records, or someone had been watching my family for years. I returned home without stopping anywhere. The first thing I did was check the locks. The second was to examine my studio computer. Nothing looked disturbed. Then I noticed the desk drawer, 2 centimeters open. I was certain I had closed it. I pulled it out. My notebook was gone, the one containing my handwritten timeline. My breathing slowed. Someone had entered, but they hadn't taken my laptop. They hadn't taken the cash in the drawer. They had taken only the notebook. Only one person knew it existed. Wei Chung. I called him. No answer. Again. Nothing. I looked at the clock. 5:42 p.m. Then I received a photograph. The missing notebook sat on a table. Beside it was a glass of whiskey. And in the corner of the photograph, the silver-edged frame of Silent Spring. A message appeared underneath. If you want this back, stop digging. I stared at the photograph. Then I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because I finally knew where they wanted me to go. Director Lin's house. I didn't go that night. That was the first thing they wouldn't expect. Instead, I called Fong Mei. Can you give me a private investigator? I can. Tonight. You sound serious. I am. She was silent for a moment. Is someone threatening you? Yes. Do you want the police involved? Not yet. Why? Because I don't know how deep this goes. Her voice became quiet. Then you need someone you trust. I know. You trust me? I looked at the photograph on my desk. Yes. Good. She hung up. At midnight, a man named Chun Wei arrived at my apartment. He was in his 40s, wore a plain dark jacket, and carried a thin folder. Fong Mei had described him as a former financial crimes investigator. He didn't waste time with introductions. Show me everything. I handed him the photograph. He studied it. Where was this taken? Unknown. You recognize the painting? Yes. Your work? Yes. Then why is someone threatening you with it? Because they want me to believe they stole it. He looked at me. Did they? No. How sure are you? I saw it 3 years ago. His eyes narrowed. 3 years ago, at Director Lin's house. He slowly closed the folder. Then we have a problem. What? That painting was reported destroyed 6 years ago. I stared at him. By whom? Your records say you. My stomach tightened. I never reported that. He pulled out a document. My signature appeared at the bottom. I knew immediately it was forged. But there was something worse. The date was 6 years ago. 2 years before I had even met Liu Yan. I sat back. Someone had been building a false history around me long before my career collapsed. Chinwei watched my expression. You didn't know? No. Then this isn't only sabotage. I know. He tapped the document. Someone has been manipulating your records for years. Can you trace it? Possibly. Do it. He nodded. Then he asked the question I had been avoiding. Why does this feel like you've seen it before? I looked at him. For one dangerous second, I almost told him everything. That I had died. That I remembered the future. That I knew which people would betray me. But some truths were too unbelievable to share. So I said, because I've already lost once. He didn't push. That was enough. The next morning, Liu Yan appeared in my studio. She stood outside the door for nearly a minute before knocking. When I opened it, she looked exhausted. Can I come in? No. She blinked. Shun Rue. You can talk from there. She glanced down the hallway. Someone is following me. I studied her face. I know. Her eyes widened. You know, I've been watched too. She lowered her voice. Director Lin isn't what you think. I don't know what I think about him. He has my original contract. What contract? The one from 3 years ago. I remained silent. She continued. He promised to fund my studio if I helped him acquire your work. There it was. The first crack. Why? I didn't know. That's not an answer. She looked at me. I was desperate. Her voice broke slightly. My family was drowning in debt. He offered me a way out. And you accepted. Yes. Then you tried to destroy my career. She closed her eyes. Yes. The word landed heavily between us. For the first time, I heard no excuse in her voice. I copied your techniques, she whispered. I know. I used your unfinished research. I know. I thought I could become better than you. You couldn't. Her eyes reddened. I know that now. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. She looked at me. Did you ever hate me? I thought about it. In my previous life, yes. She frowned. In your what? I almost froze. Then I corrected myself. I mean before. She stared at me. I turned away. Why are you telling me this? Because Director Lin wants your new painting. I stopped. My new painting? The one you're planning to make after Wintertide. I haven't told anyone about it. I know. Her face had gone pale. He knows. Ow. I don't know. I turned back. What does he want? He believes your next work contains something hidden. I remembered the red pigment, the layering, the old technique. He wasn't after my reputation alone. He wanted my research. The technique itself. Lu Yin stepped closer. Shenrue, please. I looked at her. Please what? Don't make me choose. I gave her a tired smile. You already chose. She flinched. Then she whispered, You're right. She turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. There's one more thing. What? Your painting wasn't the only thing they took. She pulled an envelope from her coat. She placed it on the floor, then walked away. I waited until she disappeared before picking it up. Inside was a photograph. My old studio, taken from across the street. The date was 6 months before the fire. On the back, someone had written, You should have died that night. I stared at the words. My hands didn't shake. They had shaken in my first life. Not now. Now I understood something. My death hadn't been the end of their plan. It had been the plan. And if I had truly been given another chance, then perhaps the greatest advantage wasn't knowing who would betray me. It was knowing that I had once trusted them enough to die. This time I wouldn't. I folded the photograph and put it in the evidence folder. Then I called Shenwei. I found something. What? A photograph from before my studio fire. Send it. I did. His reply came less than a minute later. I know this location. My heart tightened. Where? His answer appeared. The private storage facility owned by Director Lin. I stared at the message. The place where my missing files had disappeared. The place where Silent Spring was supposedly hidden. And perhaps the place where the evidence of my first death still existed. For the first time, I felt the past and present moving toward each other. I opened the curtains. Morning sunlight entered the room. 3 years ago, I had walked blindly into the darkness. This time, I would let the darkness come to me. And when it did, I would already be waiting. The storage facility looked harmless from the outside. 3 floors of gray concrete tucked behind an industrial district with a rusted sign above the entrance and security cameras mounted at every corner. Nothing about it suggested that a man's ruined career, stolen paintings, and perhaps his death had been quietly connected to this place. I sat in my car across the street and watched the gate. Shenwei sat beside me. You're certain? Yes. You've never been here. Not in this life. He turned his head. I realized my choice of words. He raised an eyebrow. I looked through the windshield. Not officially. He let it go. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then a black sedan arrived. Director Lin stepped out. He was 62, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and the calm expression of a man who had never had to fear consequences. A younger man followed him. I recognized him immediately. Wei Cheng, my former assistant. My chest tightened. Shenwei noticed. That's the man who disappeared? Yes. Wei Cheng opened the gate. Director Lin entered. The gate closed behind them. Shenwei started the engine. Now. No. He glanced at me. Why? Because they're expecting someone to follow them. I pointed toward a second vehicle parked behind the building. A white van. That's our way in. Shenwei looked at it. Your way in? I know the driver. His expression sharpened. Ooh. I watched the van's rear door open. Lu Yin stepped out. She looked around nervously. Shenwei swore under his breath. She came too. No, I said. She was brought. We waited. Lu Yin entered the building. The gate closed again. I checked the time. 9:43 p.m. In my previous life, the fire in my studio had started at 10:18. 35 minutes. That was all the time I had. I remember the flames, the smoke, the locked rear door, the sensation of falling. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Chinwei touched my wrist. You all right? Yes. You're pale. I remember something. What? The timing. I looked at the building. They won't burn the facility. How do you know? Because they didn't need to before. I started the car. We go in now. The side entrance was unlocked. That frightened me more than a locked door would have. Someone wanted us inside. Chunwei whispered, trap. I know. We entered anyway. The hallway smelled of dust, metal, and old paper. A faint mechanical hum came from somewhere below. Chunwei checked his flashlight. Basement. We followed the sound. At the bottom of the stairs, we found a steel door. It wasn't locked. Inside were rows of shelves, boxes, hard drives, painting frames, documents, and dozens of photographs. I stepped inside. My eyes moved across the shelves. One label stopped me. Shun Rue, Personal Archive. I reached for it. Shun Wei grabbed my arm. Wait. He examined the shelf. Pressure sensor. I looked down. A tiny wire ran beneath the cabinet. If you pull the box, the alarm goes off. I nodded, then smiled. They want us to see it. Shun Wei frowned. Then don't touch it. I won't. I took photographs instead. Every label, every serial number, every box. Then I noticed another shelf. Lu Yan, original materials. She had an entire archive here. Sketches, contracts, invoices, photographs, and one folder labeled Project Wintertide. My stomach tightened. I opened it. Inside were photographs of my painting from different stages. Some had dates from 11 months earlier. Others were dated almost 2 years before I had started it. That was impossible, unless someone had planned the painting before I created it. I turned another page. A handwritten note appeared. Reproduce the lower pigment layer. Below it was Lu Yan's signature. Chinwei whispered, This is enough to destroy her. I shook my head. No. He stared at me. Why not? Because this only proves she copied me. And it doesn't prove who ordered it. I turned the page. A payment record was attached. The sender was a shell company. The recipient was Lu Yan. The amount was enormous. Then I saw the company name. Lin Cultural Holdings. Chun Wei went still. We have him. Not yet. I looked at the date. The first payment had been made 6 months before I met Lu Yan. That meant the conspiracy had begun long before the rivalry everyone knew about. I heard footsteps. We both froze. Voices came from the hallway. Director Lin. And another man. Is the security system active? Yes. Good. Chinwei pulled me behind a shelving unit. The door opened. Director Lin entered with a phone in his hand. Lu Yan followed. She looked terrified. You said no one would get hurt, she whispered. Lin glanced at her. No one will. You said that about Shunrue? My breath caught. Lin's expression hardened. Lower your voice. I thought he was dead. He was. Lu Yan stared at him, then whispered. Then who is he now? Silence. The question hung in the room. My pulse slowed. Director Lin smiled. You're becoming troublesome. I need to know. You don't need to know anything. But he knows. Lin's eyes narrowed. What? He looked at me today like he'd already seen everything I was going to say. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Lu Yan was beginning to understand. Not the truth of my rebirth, but the impossibility of my behavior. Lin said quietly, Then we accelerate the plan. What plan? The new exhibition. Lu Yan shook her head. No, you don't have a choice. You promised. I promised to make you famous. His voice became cold. I never promised you freedom. Lu Yan's face collapsed. I understood then. She wasn't the mastermind. She was another prisoner. Not innocent, but trapped. And that distinction mattered. Lin walked toward the archive shelf. We removed Shun Rue's new work before the opening. What if he doesn't create one? He will. How do you know? Lin smiled. Because artists like him can't resist proving themselves. My jaw tightened. In my previous life, that had been true, but I was no longer that man. Lin continued. Once he presents the work, we'll expose the pigment technique as stolen. And the original? The original will be found in his studio. Lu Yan stared at him. You planted it already? Yes. My blood went cold. They had planted something in my studio. I looked at Chinwei. He understood immediately. We had to leave. Now, I touched his shoulder. He nodded. We moved silently toward the rear corridor. But before we reached the door, Lin spoke. There's one thing I still don't understand. I stopped. Why did he stop defending himself? Lu Yin whispered. Maybe he knows. Lin laughed. No. He sounded certain. People don't change that much. I looked back through the narrow gap. Director Lin stood beneath the fluorescent light. He had no idea how wrong he was. People could change. Death changed them. And I had already died once. We escaped through the loading bay. Only after reaching the car did Chunwei speak. They planted evidence in your studio. I know. We need to search everything. No. He looked at me sharply. Why? Because if we remove it, we lose the chance to catch them. His expression changed. You want them to think the evidence is still there. Yes. And when they come back, I started the engine. We'll be waiting. We returned to my studio at 1:15 a.m. The building was silent. Too silent. I unlocked the door. Nothing seemed different. My desk, my easel, the unfinished canvas, the old wooden cabinet. Everything looked exactly as I had left it. Chinwei walked slowly through the room. Where would they hide something? I looked around. Somewhere obvious. Why? Because they need to find it later. He stopped. I walked toward my supply cabinet. 3 rows of pigments, brushes, solvents, canvas knives. I picked up a small box. Too heavy. I opened it. Inside was a sealed plastic bag, a vial of solvent, and a folded receipt. Chen Wei's expression darkened. This could connect you to the fire. I nodded. Exactly. He photographed everything. Then he noticed something else. There's a camera. I looked up. A tiny lens was hidden inside the smoke detector. I smiled. They want to watch me discover it. Chen Wei looked at me. Then give him a show. I picked up the vial. My hand remained steady. Then I walked directly beneath the camera. I know you're watching. Chen Wei stared. I continued. Come take it. Nothing happened. I put the vial back. Then I walked away. For several minutes, the room remained silent. Finally, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. No one spoke. Then a man's voice said, You're not as clever as you think. I recognized it. Director Lin. I smiled. Neither are you. You should have taken the settlement. I never wanted your money. You wanted recognition. I wanted my work. You'll lose both. Perhaps. He was silent. Then he said, Your mother still lives in the old district, doesn't she? My expression changed. Chen Wei saw it. Lin continued. You should think carefully before making this personal. I ended the call. For the first time since my rebirth, anger rose inside me. Not for myself. For my family. That was the line. I picked up my phone. Chen Wei. Yes. Get someone to watch my mother. Already doing it. I looked at him. He smiled faintly. Fang Mei told me to. Something inside my chest loosened. I hadn't realized how much I needed one person to stand beside me without asking for anything. I sat down. For years, I had believed survival meant carrying everything alone. Maybe that had been another mistake. At 3 a.m., Chun Wei discovered another file hidden beneath the floorboard. Inside was a list of payments. Lu Yan, Wei Cheng, 2 gallery employees, a security contractor, and one name that wasn't connected to art, Zhou Ming. I stared at it. Who is he? Chen Wei searched the name. His face changed. Private investigator. Who hired him? Your old employer. I frowned. I've never worked for him. He worked for your father. My breathing stopped. My father had died when I was 12. Chen Wei continued reading. He was hired 18 years ago. Why? We don't know. I sat back. The conspiracy was older than my career. Older than Lu Yan. Older than Wintertide. Then another document fell from the folder. A photograph. My father stood beside Director Lin. Both men were younger. Behind them was a gallery. On the wall hung Silent Spring. I stared at the photograph. My father had owned that painting. The one I believed I had destroyed as a child. The one everyone claimed no longer existed. But if Lin had possessed it for 18 years, then the question wasn't why they wanted my painting. The question was why my father had hidden the technique from me, and why Director Lin had spent so many years trying to control it. I called my mother. She answered sleepily. Rue, Mom, did Dad ever know Director Lin? Silence. Too long. Why are you asking? Because I found a photograph. Another silence. Then she said quietly, Your father told me never to speak about him. My heart pounded. Why? He said Lin ruined his career. How? I don't know. You do. Her breathing became uneven. Your father discovered something. What? He found out that Lin was selling forged paintings using artist names. I closed my eyes. Did Dad have proof? Yes. Where? I don't know. Mom, I truly don't know. Then her voice dropped. He gave something to someone before he died. Who? I never learned his name. The call ended. I sat motionless. Chinwei watched me. What happened? My father knew. Knew what? That Director Lin had been doing this for years. He looked toward the photograph. Then this isn't just about you. No. I looked at the list of names. It never was. Outside, dawn began to lighten the windows. The city was waking, but I felt as if I had just stepped into a much older darkness. My father's secret, the stolen painting, the forged records, the fire, my death, everything was connected. And somewhere, someone had kept the first piece of evidence hidden for 18 years. I stood. We're going to find it. Chinwei nodded. Where do we start? I looked at the photograph of my father, then at the silver frame visible behind him. The first gallery. What if it's gone? Then we'll find whoever remembers it. I picked up my coat. Behind us, the hidden camera continued recording. It had captured everything. My mother's call, the photograph, the evidence, my plan. I knew that, and I wanted them to know that I knew. Because sometimes the best trap wasn't secrecy. It was certainty, letting your enemy believe they had discovered your weakness, letting them grow confident, letting them step closer, until there was nowhere left to run. As I reached the door, my phone vibrated. A message from Lu Yan. I found a person who knows what happened to your father. A second message followed. But Director Lin knows I found him. Then a third. He's coming for me. I stopped. For the first time, Lu Yan wasn't asking me to save her. She was warning me. I stared at the screen, then deleted the draft reply I had written. I wasn't going to rescue her. Not yet. But I wasn't going to abandon her either. If she had finally decided to tell the truth, then perhaps she had earned the chance to survive it. I typed one sentence. Stay alive. Tell me where he is. Her reply came almost instantly. The old gallery. Room 17. I looked at Chinwei. He understood. The first door had opened, and behind it waited the secret that had begun long before my first death. Room 17 had been sealed for 18 years. The old gallery stood at the end of a narrow street that had once been famous for its artists and now contained mostly antique shops and shuttered warehouses. The sign above the entrance was barely readable. Yunhe Gallery. I stood across the street with Chun Wei. You're sure this is the place? Yes. Who owns it now? No one. I looked at the dark windows. Then why is someone waiting inside? Chun Wei followed my gaze. A curtain moved on the second floor. Someone was there. We crossed the street. The front door opened before we touched it. An elderly man stood behind it. He was thin, gray-haired, and held a wooden cane. His eyes settled on me. For several seconds, he didn't speak. Then he whispered, You have your father's eyes. My chest tightened. You knew him? The old man nodded. My name is Gu Zhan. He stepped aside. Come in. The gallery smelled of dust and old wood. Paintings covered the walls beneath white sheets. Chinwei closed the door. I looked around. This place has been abandoned for years. Not abandoned, Gu Zhan said. Hidden. He walked toward the stairs. I followed. Why did my father come here? He came because he knew he was being watched. By Lin. Gu Zhan stopped. Yes. And what did he leave? The old man looked at me. Not what you think. We entered room 17. There was almost nothing inside. A table, 2 chairs, a broken lamp, and one large empty frame. I frowned. Where's the painting? Gu Zhan smiled sadly. Your father never left the painting here. My heart sank. Then why bring me here? Because he left something more important. He reached behind the frame. A hidden compartment opened. Inside was a small metal box. He handed it to me. My hands felt strangely cold. What is it? Your father's last record. I opened the box. Inside was a cassette tape. and a handwritten note. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. If Shan Rue ever returns to Yunhe, give this to him. My breath caught. Returns. Guja nodded. He knew one day you might come. Ow, I don't know. I turned the note over. Nothing. Shenwei found an old cassette player in the corner. After cleaning the dust from it, he inserted the tape. Static filled the room. Then my father's voice emerged. Weak, tired, but unmistakable. If you're hearing this, then I failed to stop Lin. My fingers tightened around the note. My father's voice continued. Lin isn't merely selling forged paintings. He's built a network around stolen techniques. Static crackled. He doesn't copy paintings. He collects the people who create them. I looked at Chinwei. My father continued. He finds young artists. He funds them. He takes their research. Then he destroys their reputations when they refuse to cooperate. My stomach turned. Lu Yan, Wei Cheng, me, all pieces of the same machine. Then came the sentence that changed everything. My son must never inherit my work. I froze. Chinwei looked at me. What does that mean? The tape continued. I created a technique that Lin wants. I hid it inside Silent Spring. But the painting itself is not the secret. I leaned closer. The secret is in the pigment formula. My pulse accelerated. That formula can reveal alterations made to old paintings. The room seemed to shrink. With it, forged works can be identified without damaging the original. I whispered, so that's why he wants it. My father's voice continued. Lin cannot allow this technique to become public. Static. Then, if he ever comes after Rue, don't fight him directly. Make him believe the formula is still hidden. The tape clicked. Silence. I stared at the player. My father's final words echoed in my mind. Make him believe the formula is still hidden. Chinwei slowly exhaled. Your father knew. Yes. He knew Lin would come after you. Yes. But how could he know? I didn't answer, because I had just realized something else. The technique wasn't merely a weapon against Lin. It was the reason my father had died. And perhaps the reason I had died too. The door suddenly slammed shut. Chinwei turned. A metallic click followed. Locked. Smoke began entering beneath the door. Fire, he said. I stared at the smoke. My heart pounded. Not because I was surprised. Because I remembered. The smell. The heat. The same kind of trap. But this time, I knew where it would begin. I ran toward the window. 3rd floor. Chinwei nodded. I smashed the glass with a wooden chair. Cold air rushed in. Below us was a narrow alley. Jump. No. I pointed upward. The roof. We climbed. Behind us, flames spread through the hallway. Someone had planned this perfectly, but they had made one mistake. They assumed I would react like the man they had killed. I reached the roof. Chinwei followed. We climbed down the opposite side using an old maintenance ladder. By the time we reached the street, smoke was pouring from the windows. The gallery burned. I stood across the road, watching. For a moment, I felt the old terror. Then my phone vibrated. A message. From Lu Yan. I'm sorry. I stared at it. Then another. They found out I talked to you. And finally, I have proof. Come alone. I looked at the burning gallery. My father's evidence was gone. Or so they believed. I reached into my coat. The cassette was still there. I had taken it before the fire spread. They had burned the room. They hadn't burned the truth. 2 hours later, I met Lu Yan in an underground parking garage. She stood beside a concrete pillar. Her face was bruised. Her coat was torn. For the first time, she looked less like my rival and more like someone who had finally realized the cage she lived in had no door. You came. I said I would. She looked at Chinwei. You said alone. I changed my mind. She smiled bitterly. You're still impossible. Where's the proof? She handed me a small flash drive. Everything Lin kept. I didn't take it immediately. What do you want? Nothing. I looked at her. That isn't true. She swallowed. I want to live. That answer was honest. I took the drive. She continued. There are recordings, payment records, copies of your research, messages between Lin and the gallery board. Anything about my studio fire? Yes. My fingers tightened around the drive. Who started it? She looked away. Lin ordered it. Who carried it out? Silence. Lu Yan. She closed her eyes. I don't know. You do. I wasn't there. Then who was? She whispered a name. Zhou Ming. Chunwei looked at me. The investigator from my father's records. The same man connected to my first death. Everything had finally come together. But Lu Yan wasn't finished. There is one more thing. What? Your masterpiece wasn't supposed to be destroyed. I frowned. What? They wanted to replace it. With what? A copy. My stomach tightened. The damaged canvas was only a distraction. After the exhibition, they planned to substitute a replica and claim you had forged your own work. I understood. The sabotage wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. They wanted the original. They wanted the technique. They wanted my name. And they wanted me discredited enough that nobody would believe me. Lu Yan looked at me. You were supposed to disappear again. The words were barely audible. I stared at her. Again, she realized what she'd said. What do you mean? She stepped back. You said again. Her face went pale. Shunrui, you knew. No, you knew I died. I heard rumors. What rumors? She couldn't answer. I took one step toward her. Who told you? She looked terrified. Then a voice came from the darkness behind us. I did. Director Lin stepped into the light. Two men stood behind him. One was Zhou Ming. The other was a security guard from the exhibition. I recognized him immediately. The same man who had stopped me from reaching my painting. Lin smiled. You've made this unnecessarily complicated. I looked at him. You killed me. He didn't deny it. You were becoming inconvenient. Lu Yan covered her mouth. You said he fell. He did. You pushed him. Lin's expression remained calm. Enough. I felt something inside me settle. For years, I had wondered whether my death had truly been intentional. Now I knew, and strangely, the certainty brought peace. You've made one mistake, I said. Lin laughed. Which one? You think this is still my first life? His smile disappeared. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Chunwei looked at me sharply. Lu Yan froze. Lin stared. What did you say? I stepped forward. You heard me. Zhou Ming reached inside his coat. Chunwei moved instantly. Don't. Lin raised a hand. Wait. His eyes remained fixed on me. You're lying. Maybe. How could you know about the fire? I survived it. You died. I did. Silence. Lin's face slowly changed. I continued. You made the same mistake twice. What mistake? You assumed death erased evidence. I pulled a cassette from my pocket. His expression collapsed. Where did you get that? My father. He stepped backward. For the first time, Director Lin looked old. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just afraid. Chunwei held up his phone. And everything on Lu Yan's drive has already been copied. Lin stared at him. You think that's enough? No. Chunwei said. It's only the beginning. Sirens sounded in the distance. Lin looked toward the exit. Police lights reflected against the concrete walls. Lu Yan began crying. I sent the files. I looked at her. To whom? Everyone. What? Journalists. Art foundations. The police. She wiped her face. I scheduled them before I came here. Lin turned toward her. You betrayed me. She shook her head. No. Her voice steadied. I stopped betraying myself. The police entered the garage. Zhou Ming tried to run. He didn't get far. Two officers forced him against the hood of a car. Director Lin remained motionless. One officer approached. Director Lin? Lin looked at me. His eyes were filled with hatred. You think you've won? I met his gaze. No. He frowned. I stopped fighting. His expression twisted. That isn't victory. It is for me. The officer took his arm. As they led him away, he suddenly laughed. You still don't know what your father hid. I stopped. He smiled. You think the formula is the secret? He shook his head. Your father never trusted you with the real one. Then he disappeared through the exit. I stood in silence. Chunwei looked at me. Don't listen to him. I know, but the word stayed with me. 3 days later, the entire art world was talking about Director Lin. The evidence spread faster than anyone expected. Forged paintings, stolen techniques, coerced artists, fraudulent insurance claims, payments to gallery employees, the attempted destruction of my work. The investigation into my previous death was reopened. Zhou Ming confessed. He admitted that he had sabotaged my studio. He admitted following me. He admitted pushing me down the stairwell 3 years earlier. The official report had called my death accidental. Now it was homicide. My name was cleared, but I didn't celebrate. I returned to the gallery where Wintertide had been destroyed. The canvas still hung there. Torn, damaged, unrepaired. Professor Chow stood beside me. We can restore it. I looked at the painting. No. Why? Because this is what happened. He frowned. You don't want to hide the damage? I spent too much of my life trying to make damaged things look untouched. He looked at me quietly, then nodded. Perhaps you're right. I touched the edge of the torn canvas. The wound remained, but now it belonged to the painting, not to me. Lu Yin testified for 6 hours. She admitted everything. The copying, the payments, the sabotage, her role in the plan. She didn't ask for forgiveness. That mattered. When she finished, she simply said, I don't expect him to forgive me. I never did. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed her, but I also didn't hate her anymore. Hatred required attention. I had better things to do. 1 week later, Fong Mei brought me a folder. Your father's estate. I frowned. I thought everything was settled years ago. So did I. Inside was a key. Small. Brass. Attached to a handwritten label. Storage 17. I stared at it. Where did this come from? Your father's lawyer. I looked at the key. Room 17. The old gallery. The secret he'd hidden. I realized then that Director Lin had been right about one thing. The formula wasn't the whole secret. But whatever remained, I would discover it on my own terms. I closed the folder. Outside, the city moved beneath the afternoon sun. For the first time in years, I didn't feel chased by my past. It was behind me now. Not gone. Not forgotten. Simply no longer in control. And somewhere inside a locked room, my father's final secret was waiting. The key fit a lock beneath the old gallery. I had expected another archive. Another stack of documents. Another hidden record proving that my father had spent his final years fighting Director Lin. Instead, the door opened into a small room filled with sunlight. There were no shelves, no files, no paintings, only a wooden desk beside a window. On the desk sat a letter. My name was written across the envelope. Not Rue, not Shun Rue. My father had written, to my son, when he is finally old enough to understand. I sat down. For several seconds, I couldn't open it. My father had died when I was 12. For most of my life, I had remembered him as a distant figure, strict, impatient, always surrounded by canvases and business papers. I remembered the arguments. I remembered him telling me never to touch his unfinished paintings. I remember being angry when he stopped coming home early. But I had forgotten the small things. The way he peeled apples for me. The way he waited outside my school when it rained. The way he pretended not to worry when I failed an examination. I broke the seal. The first line made my eyes burn. Rue, if you were reading this, then I failed to protect you from the world I entered. I swallowed. The letter continued. You may have heard that I created a technique that can identify altered paintings. That is true, but it is not what I want you to inherit. I frowned. Art is not a weapon, Rue. I made the mistake of treating it like one. I leaned back. The room was silent except for the ticking of an old clock. Lin believed my discovery belonged to him because he had funded my work. I believed I could defeat him by exposing him. I was wrong. My fingers tightened around the paper. The more I fought him, the more of my life became about him. That sentence struck harder than I expected, because I understood it. I had spent my first life doing exactly the same thing, trying to prove Lu Yin wrong, trying to prove the gallery wrong, trying to prove the police wrong, trying to prove that I deserved to be believed. My entire identity had slowly become a reaction to other people's actions. My father had recognized the trap. I hadn't. The letter continued. If you ever find this, don't spend your life seeking revenge. Truth has its own weight. Let it fall where it must. I closed my eyes. For the first time, my father's death didn't feel like an unfinished argument. It felt like advice arriving 18 years late. At the bottom of the letter was one final paragraph. There's another reason I hid the formula. It can expose forged art, but it can also destroy authentic work if used carelessly. I refused to publish it because I didn't trust myself to decide who deserved the truth. I read that sentence twice. Then I understood. The secret wasn't a miraculous formula. It was responsibility. My father hadn't hidden knowledge because he wanted power. He had hidden it because he feared what power could do. I folded the letter. A shadow appeared beneath the door. I looked up. Fong Mei stood there. You found it. I nodded. What was inside? My father's regrets. She smiled softly. Sounds like him. You knew him. Only once. When you were a child. I looked at her. She walked into the room. He asked me to watch you. My chest tightened. What? He knew Lin might come after you. Why didn't you tell me? Because your mother begged me not to. I stared at her. All these years. Yes. You were watching me? Not every day. She smiled. Just enough. For some reason. That hurt more than any accusation. There had been people protecting me while I believed I was alone. I looked down at my father's letter. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were 12. I laughed quietly. I spent years thinking everyone had abandoned me. Fong Mei sat across from me. You weren't abandoned. She reached across the table. You were grieving. I looked away. My eyes burned. I hadn't cried at my father's funeral. I hadn't cried when my studio burned. I hadn't cried when Lu Yin betrayed me. But now, sitting in that small room with an old letter in my hands, tears finally came. Quietly, without shame. Fong Mei didn't speak. She simply stayed. And for the first time, I understood what healing actually meant. It wasn't forgetting. It was no longer needing the people who hurt you to understand your pain. A month later, the investigation into my work concluded. Every major accusation against me was dismissed. The gallery offered to reinstate my exhibition. I refused. Professor Chow called me. You're really leaving? Yes. You have every right to return. I know. Then why? I looked around my studio, at the half-finished canvases, at the shelves of pigments, at the empty chair where Wei Chung used to sit. I don't want to work somewhere that only values me after proving I wasn't guilty. He was silent. Then he laughed. You sound like your father. I smiled. Hopefully I've learned from his mistakes too. I sold the studio, not because I hated it, because I didn't need a room filled with ghosts. With the money, I rented a smaller space near the river. There was no prestigious sign outside, no gallery board, no investors, just sunlight, 3 large windows, a wooden floor, and enough room for one person to paint. I placed Wintertide against the far wall. I still hadn't repaired it. Visitors sometimes asked why. I always gave the same answer. Because it survived. One afternoon, Professor Chiao brought me a young artist. She was 22, nervous, and carried a portfolio against her chest. Mr. Shun, she said, I heard you might look at my work. I opened the portfolio. Her paintings were rough. Some were terrible. One was beautiful. I stopped there. This one. She looked surprised. You like it? Yes. Really? You don't? She shook her head. I thought it wasn't finished. Good. She stared. A finished painting can be technically perfect and emotionally dead. I handed it back. Keep working. She smiled. Would you mentor me? I thought about it, then nodded. On one condition. What? You don't paint to impress me. She laughed nervously. Then who do I paint for? I looked at Wintertide. For yourself. She left an hour later. I remained by the window. The river reflected the evening light. My phone buzzed. A message from Lu Yin. She had been released on bail while the trial continued. I received the court documents. I will testify fully. I didn't reply. Another message came. I know you don't forgive me. I don't expect you to. I stared at the screen, then put the phone away. Some doors didn't need to be reopened. 2 months passed. My new studio became quieter than the old one, and somehow fuller. Young artists came. Some stayed. Some left. Nobody was required to praise me. Nobody was afraid of me. Nobody cared about my old reputation. They cared about the work. That was enough. One evening, Wei Chung came to visit. He looked thinner, but lighter. I got a job. I smiled. Where? Small restoration company. Good. He hesitated. I want to say thank you. For what? For not exposing me as the worst version of myself. I looked at him. You did terrible things. I know, but you also stopped. He nodded. My sister is safe now. Then protect her. He smiled. I will. Before leaving, he turned. Do you ever think about what happened? Every day. Doesn't it make you angry? I considered the question. No. He looked surprised. Why? Because I'm alive. He smiled. So that's it. No. I looked at the unfinished canvas on my easel. That's the beginning. The first time I exhibited Wintertide again, I didn't call it comeback. There were no cameras, no red carpet, no press release announcing my return. Just a small exhibition in my own studio. 30 people came. Among them were Professor Chiao, Feng Mei, Wei Chung, and several young artists I had begun mentoring. The torn painting hung on the main wall. A small plaque beneath it read, "Wintertide, unrestored." A visitor stared at the canvas. Why leave it damaged? I smiled. Because someone tried to decide how the story would end. And you didn't let them? No. I looked at the torn section. I decided it myself. The visitor nodded slowly, then moved on. Feng Mei approached. You look happy. I am. She raised an eyebrow. That's new. I laughed. It is. She looked around the studio. You really don't miss the old gallery? No, not even a little. I thought about Lu Yin, Director Lin, the police station, the burned studio, my first death. Then I looked at the people around me. No. She smiled. Good. Later that evening, after everyone left, I stood alone before Wintertide. The city outside was quiet. I touched the torn canvas. Once, I had thought destruction meant failure. Now I understood something different. A painting wasn't only what the artist intended. It was also what survived. My phone rang. This time it was my mother. Rui, I'm here. Did the exhibition go well? Yes. Your father would have been proud. I smiled. I think so. She was silent. Then, do you still hate what happened? No. Are you sure? I looked at the painting. Yes. She exhaled. Then come home tomorrow. I will. After the call, I turned off the lights. Before leaving, I looked once more at the canvas. The damage was still visible, but beneath the tear, the crimson layer remained. The same hidden color that had once been used against me. Now, it was simply part of the painting. That was what I wanted. Not revenge. Not vindication. Ownership. The right to decide what my own scars meant. The trial began 6 months later. Director Lin's lawyers tried to claim he had been framed. The evidence said otherwise. Bank records, messages, audio recordings, security footage, the recovered archives, and finally, the testimony of Lu Yin. I attended only once. Not because I needed to see him punished. Because I wanted to hear the truth spoken in a room where nobody could erase it. Director Lin entered the courtroom wearing a dark suit. He looked smaller than I remembered. He saw me. His expression hardened. During a recess, he approached. The guards allowed him only a few steps. You came. Yes. You think this changes anything? No. He smiled bitterly. Then why are you here? I looked at him. To stop carrying you. His smile disappeared. You'll regret what you did. I didn't do anything. You exposed me. No. I shook my head. You exposed yourself. His eyes narrowed. You waited for this. I waited for you to make your choices. You knew. Yes. Ow. I held his gaze. I learned to stop interrupting people when they're destroying themselves. For a moment, he said nothing. And the guards took him away. I never saw him again. After the trial, Lu Yin sent me one final letter. I read it once, then kept it. She didn't ask forgiveness. She didn't ask for friendship. She wrote, I used to think winning meant standing above someone else. Now I understand that sometimes the only victory is becoming someone you can live with. I didn't know whether she would succeed. That was no longer my concern. I wished her well, from a distance. Some people belonged in your memories, not your life. A year after my rebirth, I stood in the same city where I had once died. The old gallery was gone. The new studio was thriving. My mother visited every Sunday. Feng Mei still complained that I worked too late. Wei Chung had become a skilled restoration specialist. The young artist I had mentored won her first competition. And Wintertide still hung on my wall. Still torn. Still alive. One winter evening, I began a new painting. The canvas was blank. For a long time, I simply sat in front of it. Then I picked up a brush. No secret technique. No hidden message. No strategy. No one to defeat. I painted the river outside my window. The lights. The winter sky. The reflection of a man standing alone. Not the man who had died. Not the man who had been betrayed. Just the man who remained. I stepped back. For the first time, I didn't wonder what anyone else would think. I didn't imagine Lu Yin seeing it. I didn't imagine Director Lin fearing it. I didn't imagine critics praising it. I simply looked at it and smiled. My second life hadn't given me revenge. It had given me something better, the chance to stop living for the people who had once decided my worth. I opened the window. Cold air entered the room. Outside, the river moved steadily toward the sea. I watched it for a while, then returned to the canvas. There was still work to do, and this time, every stroke belonged to me. 3 years after Director Lynn's conviction, I received an envelope without a return address. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. No stamp, no courier label, just my name written in black ink. Shenrue. I was standing in the studio doorway when I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. My father's old gallery. The building no longer existed, but someone had photographed its empty foundation. On the back, for words had been written, "You never found everything." I stared at the sentence. For a moment, the old instinct returned. The urge to investigate, to search, to uncover another hidden enemy. Then I placed the photograph on my desk. I didn't touch it again. Fong Mei arrived an hour later. She found me painting. "You got something?" I nodded. She saw the photograph. "Who sent it?" "I don't know." "You're not going to investigate?" "No." She looked surprised. "Why?" I dipped my brush into the paint. "Because if someone wants my attention, they can earn it honestly." She smiled. "That sounds like the man I know." I looked at the photograph again. 3 years ago, that message would have consumed me. I would have searched every archive, called every investigator, reopened every wound. Now it was just paper. A threat only had power when you allowed it to decide your next move. I returned to my painting. "What are you working on?" "A river." "Again, this one's different." "Ow!" I glanced at the canvas. "It's flowing forward." She laughed. "You've become annoyingly philosophical." "I've earned it." She picked up the photograph. "Should I destroy this?" I shook my head. "No. Keep it." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I want to remember that I had a choice." She nodded and put it back. That afternoon, my students arrived. The studio filled with voices, brushes tapping against jars, music playing quietly, someone arguing about perspective, someone else complaining that their paint had dried. Ordinary noise. Beautiful noise. I watched them for a moment. There was a time when I believed survival meant escaping everyone. Now I understood that survival also meant choosing the right people to keep. I had done that. Slowly, carefully, without guilt. That evening, my mother called. "Are you coming Sunday?" "Yes. You said that last week." "I'll come." "You'd better." I smiled. Then she asked, "Did you receive something today?" My hand stopped. "What?" "An envelope." I stood. "How do you know?" Silence. "Mom." She sighed. "Because your father once received one too." My heart tightened. What was inside? I don't know. You never told me. I was afraid. Of what? That the past would find you again. I looked toward the photograph. Maybe it already has. She was quiet, then said, "Your father made one mistake." "What?" "He believed he could protect everyone by keeping secrets." I sat down. Maybe that's why he left the letter. Maybe. "Mom." "Yes." "Do you regret not telling me?" She took a long breath. "Every day." I closed my eyes. "I don't." "You should." "No." I looked out the window. "You were trying to protect me." "I failed." "You kept me alive." The silence that followed was different, softer. Then she whispered, "Your father would have liked hearing you say that." I smiled. I think I would have liked hearing him say it too. The next Sunday, I went home. My mother had prepared too much food, as always. After dinner, she opened an old wooden cabinet. Inside were my father's remaining belongings. His watch, his fountain pen, a few letters, and a small sketchbook. I picked it up. I've never seen this. He kept it hidden. I opened the first page. There were sketches of landscapes, then portraits, then one drawing that made me stop. It was me. I couldn't have been more than 6. I was sleeping against my father's shoulder. Underneath, he had written, "He thinks strength means never falling. One day, I hope he learns that strength means getting up without becoming cruel." My vision blurred. I closed the book. My mother watched me. "He loved you very much." I know. I had spent my first life believing my father had abandoned me. I had spent years angry at a dead man. But grief had turned memory into something cruel. I remembered what hurt. I forgot what remained. I held the sketchbook against my chest. "I forgive him." My mother looked at me. For what? For not being able to save everything. She touched my hand. He would forgive you too. I shook my head. I don't need forgiveness. She smiled. Then you've finally grown up. We both laughed. For the first time, the memory of my father didn't feel heavy. It felt warm. A month later, I received another invitation. This one came from a National Art Foundation. They wanted to honor my work. I almost declined. Then I read the final line. We would like to recognize your contribution to young artists and ethical restoration practices. I accepted, not for the award, for the students. At the ceremony, I stood beneath bright lights while Professor Chiao introduced me. He said many things. Most of them made me uncomfortable. When I reached the podium, the hall became quiet. I looked at the audience. Years earlier, I had stood before crowds trying to prove I wasn't a fraud. Now I stood there without needing anyone to believe anything. I don't think artists should be measured by how perfectly they protect their work, I said. They should be measured by whether they remain honest when protecting it becomes difficult. The audience listened. I continued. I once believed that losing a painting meant losing myself. A pause. Now I know better. I looked toward my students sitting in the front row. A painting can be damaged. A reputation can be damaged. A life can be damaged. But none of those things have to decide what comes next. The applause began quietly, then grew. I stepped away from the microphone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Not with painting, with the war. And that was enough. After the ceremony, I went outside alone. The city was cold. Snow had begun falling. I stood beneath a street lamp and watched it disappear into the darkness. Fong Mei came out a few minutes later. You ran away from your own celebration. I needed air. She handed me a coat. You always do this. What? Leave before people can tell you how important you are. I smiled. Maybe I don't need to be important. She looked at me. You're allowed to be. I considered that. Then nodded. Maybe. We walked toward the river. The snow settled quietly on the pavement. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Fong Mei said, Do you ever think about the man you were before? Yes. What would you tell him? I stopped walking. The question stayed with me. I imagined myself 3 years earlier. Angry, terrified, desperate to be believed, standing in front of a ruined painting, believing that if he could just prove the truth, everything would return to normal. I looked across the river. I'd tell him to stop. Stop what? Stop trying to save people who are choosing to hurt him. She nodded. And I'd tell him that being betrayed doesn't mean he was foolish for trusting. And I smiled faintly. I'd tell him he doesn't have to become cruel just because someone else was. Fame looked at me. That sounds like a good ending. I shook my head. No. She raised an eyebrow. A beginning. The following spring, I opened a small art center. Not a gallery. Not a commercial studio. A place where young artists could work without investors controlling their techniques or galleries owning their names. The first room was free. The second was affordable. Every contract was transparent. Every artist kept ownership of their work. I named it Yuna House. When Professor Chiao saw the sign, he laughed. You named it after the old gallery? Yes. Why? Because I don't want the past to own the name. He smiled. That's very Shunrue. Is that good? Finally. Inside, Wintertide occupied the main wall. Still torn. Still unrestored. People asked why I kept it. I always answered, because it reminds me that surviving isn't the same as pretending nothing happened. One evening, a young student stood before it. Sir? Yes. Did you hate the person who did this? I looked at the damaged canvas. I did. Do you still? No. Why? I smiled. Because hate is expensive. She frowned. What do you mean? It costs attention. She thought about that, then nodded. Was revenge satisfying? I laughed softly. I never got revenge. Her eyes widened. But they were punished. Yes. Isn't that revenge? No. I looked at her. That's consequence. She seemed confused. I pointed toward the painting. Revenge means you chase someone. I pointed toward the door. Consequence means you step aside and let them walk where their own choices lead. She smiled. I think I understand. Good. She returned to her painting. I watched her for a moment, then turned back to the river outside. The water moved beneath the evening light. Always forward, never asking permission from the past. Years later, people would tell the story differently. Some would say I defeated Director Lin. Others would say Liu Yin destroyed herself. Some would call Wintertide my greatest work. Others would say my real achievement was Yuna House. They would all be partly right, but none of them knew the truth. The greatest thing I gained wasn't success. It wasn't justice. It wasn't even a second life. It was the understanding that I didn't have to spend my second life correcting the first. One winter evening, I stood alone in the studio after everyone had gone. The old photograph from the anonymous envelope was still on my desk. I took it out, looked at the words. You never found everything. Then I turned the photograph over. On the blank side, I wrote 4 words of my own. I found enough to live. I placed it back in the drawer. Then I closed it. No investigation. No phone call. No fear. Just closure. I walked to Wintertide. The torn section had become part of its identity. I ran my fingers lightly across the frame. Thank you, I whispered. I wasn't speaking to the painting. I was speaking to the man I had once been. The man who had died, believing his story was over. He had been wrong. His story had ended. Mine had begun. I turned off the studio lights. Outside, the river reflected the city. I locked the door, then walked home. Not toward revenge. Not toward another battle. Not toward the past. Just home. And for the first time in either life, I knew exactly where I was going.